Hello, welcome to Going AFK. With the Steam Machine coming up, we are so close to achieving the Linux dream. You can play games on your Linux PC when you're at your desk, then to your Linux handheld when you're out and about, and then finally to your Linux console when you want to play a few games at your couch. But you may be wondering, where does VR come into this? With the Steam Frame, you can use their wireless dongle to stream VR data back and forth between the computer and the headset. The headset sends tracking data of your controls, the headset's position, and even where you look with the Steam Frame, and your computer sends to your headset the actual rendered game. We can see services like this with the Quest Link and the Steam Link being used to stream games from your PC. Now, with the Valve ecosystem, it would make sense to plug in your Steam Frame right into your Steam machine, right? Well, we're going to investigate that in today's video. Today we'll be going over connecting our VR headset, I currently have a Quest 3, to a Linux computer running CachyOS, testing various different VR games and see how they perform and if there are any issues that we have with them. And let's get to it. Since I'm using a Quest 3 and I do not like cables at all, I wanted to do wireless VR. Although I didn't have some issues, I originally wanted to use Steam Link since that's what I use for my Windows boot. But that did not work at all. It kept on hanging, it just saying my PC didn't exist even though I tried doing the Steam pairing. But in the end I went with ALVR. I must praise it for how simple it is to run. Overall, it was a great experience to just clicking launch Steam VR, just running the app on my headset. Everything felt simple. It felt like Steam Link where all I had to do was just click go and boom, I was in Steam VR. And surprisingly, really good connection and super fast. I went for 6 different VR titles. These were not chosen for any reason, mainly just wanted to try different things from the developers, varying in popularity rating. For our first game, let's talk about Pavlov. Well, we can talk about the Counter-Strike of the VR world. This game made the rounds in 2018 to 19, where it was a very realistic VR shooter. Realistic in the sense of the gunplay, where players can grab their guns, actually reload them, aim down the sights and control their recoil. I did have initial problems when loading in, but I was able to change my Proton version and it was able to be fixed quite quickly. I think this is due to Pavlov using easy anti-cheat. And it's great to see that it's being supported on Linux because this game actually ran really well. As you can see from the gameplay here, once it was up and running, the experience was smooth and fully playable. Matchmaking worked, controller tracking was accurate, and the interactions like reloading and weapon handling behaved exactly as expected. Performance stayed stable throughout the matches I tested, with no major frame drops or crashes. So despite my initial concerns around anti-cheat, Pavlov is a solid example of a competitive VR title that is currently runs well on Linux with the right setup. Now, a small game with no reviews, so far at least, with a great soundtrack. Listen to this. Everybody. Furo is a game where you take the simple buzz and wire game and port it into virtual reality space. The mechanics are super easy and fun, the environments look amazing, and the soundtrack is just a vibe. I absolutely had no real technical issues once the game launched. Performance stayed consistently stable with no noticeable frame dips, hitching, or tracking problems. Even though I'm pretty bad at the game, playing like I got the shivers, Furo works perfectly on Linux without needing any other adjustment. I think this shows that even an indie game where the developer may not even consider Linux support can just work. The Lab is one of Valve's early VR showcase titles, and a lot of people use it as a quick test to see their VR setups are working correctly. But it's also a fun game. It includes a collection of small experiences and minigames, so it usually gives a good baseline for checking compatibility and VR performance. In my testing though, performance was very stuttery from the start. Frame pacing was inconsistent, and it never really smoothed out enough to feel comfortable in the headset. I could push through it for short periods, but most people would likely find it unplayable in this state. I also noticed some odd visual flashing in certain scenes, like brief rendering glitches, which made the experience somewhat distracting. Tracking and input still worked, but the performance problems overshadowed everything else. Since this is a Valve title tied closely to Steam VR, there is a reasonable chance these issues can be improved in the future. I imagine when the Steam frame comes out, it might just be a driver update. So while it is rough right now on my Linux VR setup, it is a kind of title that can become stable with upstream fixes later on.
Welcome to the StarTenders
StarTenders
Academy
is a VR title from the publisher Yogscast Game and the studio Frontworks. I bought this game because it was on a good sale, plus it's in space. It has a fun twist to your typical bartending game that you may find on the store.
Wow!
As this is in space, it has some wacky ingredients where you can mix them together with different machines and overall just have a fun time and some drinks for people. When I first launched the game, there were some audio issues. For some reason, the audio was slowed down compared to the actual game. It was like the audio was in half speed.
On my best to recompile you into the configuration of a typical Earth being, but look, I'm just gonna say it. You only have 4 limbs.
There was also some major crackling going on. It was super weird because the game itself ran completely fine. But after switching from the default Proton to the CachyOS version, mind you, I am using CachyOS, it worked perfectly fine afterwards. In ALVR, there was no issue from then on. Now and again, there was some hitches, but again, I think I would attribute that to maybe my router playing up with the VR, but otherwise, the gameplay was absolutely fine. I do actually honestly recommend you play StarTenders. It's a really fun game to go through with a couple of cool fun mechanics like weldering and such, and yeah, it's really fun. Otherwise, on Linux, it works completely well. No Man's Sky is an amazing game, although after spending 10 hours on it in normal desktop mode, it isn't my cup of tea, but I do think I can appreciate the work that goes into this game. I decided to choose this game is because it has a supported VR mode, not only from the desktop mode. I booted into the game and there was honestly no issue. Well, besides from the minor stutters from loading, but I think that is just a general No Man's Sky thing, everything worked well. It was super fun flying around the spaceship, but being honest, this is more of a me problem. I did not get the controls at all in VR. I wanted to land, but I ended up just kept on flying about. But again, still such a super fun game, and I had no issues running it on my configuration. Now we have Half-Life Alyx. Again, it is weird to see from a Valve title considering they are investing heavily into the Linux gaming space, but the game had some issues. When loading, CachyOS Proton did not work at all. The game would, well at least I think, would load into the background but nothing would ever happen. I then switched over to Proton 9. After waiting 5 minutes for the Vulkan shaders to be processed, the game did work, but to an extent. Once I was in the game technically ran smoothly at first glance, but the same lighting issues had appeared similar from the lab. Again, this may be a source issue, as in terms of the source engine, but I think Valve can easily fix this, so we can probably see a future update later on. Otherwise, the game ran without any problems, any hitching, everything just seemed fine. I think it's really just those lighting issues, and we can see that being solved in the future. But otherwise, I think Half-Life Alyx, maybe just wait for an update and then just play on Linux. So at the end of all this, I think VR is in a good place right now, where we can have good working titles for you, and maybe with a few tweaks to Steam VR and Proton, or with future updates, it will make a much more better experience. I do want to note that not everything is compatible. There's plenty of sites and enthusiasts online that have talked about Linux compatibility with VR games, but funnily enough, it's not even about it not being compatible with Linux, it's more about the easy anti-cheat. A lot of gamers are still played by anti-cheat on Linux, and sadly we can't get games like Ghost of Tabor due to some players being reported being banned on sites like ProtonDB and just subreddits around. Hopefully with the Steam frame we can have more developers opt into Linux compatibility like Pavlov, so we can have more games to play on Linux out of the box. So this is Going AFK, I hope you enjoyed my video. This is my first one and sorry it's a bit scuffed, I'm still trying to get used to it. And hope you tune in for next month's video where we'll be looking into a certain type of console and making it a bit better. See you in the next one.